Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, you've found Santa Rosa Week TV. I'm Jerry Cooey.
I'm Deborah Nelson. Thanks for joining us.
And I got to start out right away. I have to dig my TV partner. The Democrats just gathered together to pick their delegates and
to the state convention.
I asked her, so I'm going to say it while we're on camera. I said, well, are y'all going to pick anybody besides Obama?
It's not likely, no. He's the de facto party leader at this point.
You think he'll be picked?
I think he's got a good chance.
Good.
Yeah.
Who do you think his running mate's going to be?
It looks like, well, as far as I know, it's going to be Joe Biden again. I don't know.
You think so?
I assume.
After Joe Biden's latest gaffe, I understand that there's an orangutan at the New Orleans Zoo that put in an application for that because that orangutan actually said, "Look, I won't run my mouth too much."
Well, he seems to have that Reagan Teflon thing going though, where it doesn't much matter what he says.
No, it's because most people went through Bible study and you always learn not to pick on people that can't help themselves. That's why Joe Biden gets away with it. I mean, the language and just on and on and on. I mean,
well, it's going to be an interesting campaign. What about your party? Speaking of running mate,
besides the Democrat-Republican issue, if he was on my side of the street,
right,
I'd be embarrassed to be around him.
Well,
I mean, he's truly an embarrassment.
Some of it's a little bit. It gets humorous sometimes.
On our side, I'll give you your fair shot.
Speaking of chimpanzees and wings.
Well, obviously, we're going to get behind Mitt Romney.
No, but for a running mate, though, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot of options out there.
Yes, there are. All equally entertaining.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump maybe's kind of raised his hand a little bit.
That'd be beautiful.
On a serious note, I don't know. Just kind of reading between the lines. I think it could be our buddy from New Jersey, the governor over there. He would be Christie.
Yeah, Christie. He's already said he's not going to run though.
No, he softened his stance.
Oh, so, come on, no.
Now that will be truly entertaining because he's pretty quick.
Yeah, but he's speaking of people with a mouth. He's
pretty quick.
Y'all aren't going to win any. You already have some problems with a lot of demographics that are not going to improve with him.
Right. Well, and folks, let me address this. Although who the president is
we don't really have any demographics except the Tea Party that have a problem with us. We're not going to win them over.
Although the presidency is very important, and let me tell you very quickly, the most important reason that the president matters is picks to the Supreme Court. And there are a couple coming up that's going to be picked, and should Deborah and her party get her way and Obama gets to pick them, they'll go find some leftist-leaning former socialist communist to be the next.
But I can't ideologically go down that road because I'm still angry about the Kelo versus New London, Connecticut.
Well, even on a conservative court, we have a problem.
But no, what I'm telling you is that the conservatives are the ones who actually voted for people to keep their houses, and that's, yeah. Well, that's a watershed moment in U.S. history where we got screwed by the Supreme Court.
With the exception of the president picking replacements for the Supreme Court, that's the biggest thing. But folks, let me tell you point blank, where the rubber meets the road is the U.S. House of Representatives, because they spend your dollars and make policy. And second most important is the Senate.
Well, let me amend that, though. The Senate has the ability to filibuster and make sure nothing ever gets discussed.
They do it. And my most learned TV partner, I'm glad you said that, because I'm going to tell you that the fine folks of Indiana, one of our long-term reverend Republicans that's a big part of the problem up there, Richard Lugar.
Yeah.
He got ousted. He's not even going to be on the ballot. He didn't even get picked within his party.
You shouldn't have voted for those bailouts.
And
nobody wanted those.
One of the things that I have said over and over, and I have penned letters concerning that. As far as my party is concerned, we need to get rid of the rhinos, Republican in name only. And we have a bunch of deadwood in Washington, D.C. that claim to be Republicans. Let me correct myself. Claim to be Republicans and claim to be caring and loving about our community, and they vote and allow things up there that is absolutely obtuse to what most people believe in.
I seem to remember a certain individual from Shemukla who voted in favor of CAFTA
absolutely.
and other free trade agreements.
You know, I will not miss an opportunity to remind you folks, your hometown boy, your U.S. House of Representative member, not mine, voted for multiple free trade agreements which cost estimated millions of jobs in the U.S.
And allow foreign companies to sue American.
And allow foreign companies. He also, on the defense authorization bill, allows the government to come to your house and drag you out in the middle of the night without due process and keep you in prison forever simply by running up the terrorist flag. In that same defense authorization bill, Jeff Miller from Shemukla, Florida, voted in favor of bestiality in the U.S. Military Code of Conduct.
He's never said that.
And though he voted for it, Deborah. He voted for it.
I have to say it.
Well, you can say whatever you want to. He voted for it. And the final, most ridiculous thing that he's voted for since he's been your U.S. House member is he voted to raise the debt ceiling. And folks, let me tell you, that was the most irresponsible vote that anybody in Congress has ever taken. Okay? When you're drowning in debt and you're in a bind financially, and the International Monetary Fund is threatening to come to the United States of America and take over your finances, you don't raise the debt ceiling so you can spend more money on foolish
And the only thing
activities.
I would just ask about that is, was it only bad that time, or was it bad every single other time that they voted for it?
I'll give it to you.
Okay.
I'll give it to you. To me, there is a certain economic thought that you should carry some debt. I don't disagree with it. Some of the economists that look at it, it increases, it rises everybody's boat when you're carrying some debt to have some cash for investment, all that kind of stuff that's borrowed. The problem now is it's about $2.8 billion a week worth of interest.
I'm not arguing that point. I agree with you.
I mean, it's completely insane. But back to the original point, folks. In 2010, the average. Let's talk about incumbents for a minute in federal elections. The average return rate in Washington, D.C. has been 97% of the incumbents get returned to office. Okay. In 2010, 25%, it dropped all the way down to 75% return. 25% of them across the board, some House, some Senate, some retired, some knew that they were fixing to get run out of office.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we changed about 115.
Nobody who voted for the bailout should have been returned.
I have seen, and I think you will agree with it, they held firm on a few things. They didn't cave in on some things, and a little bit of sense is coming back. But 115 wasn't enough. Look, folks, I'll tell you right now, everybody that's in the House right now that voted against, the House or the Senate, that voted against raising the debt ceiling, I'm okay with them staying there. But that still leaves about 350 of them that need to be booted to the curb.
Well,
because they voted for the debt ceiling.
It's not a litmus test for me, but nobody who voted for those bailouts should be returned to any public office.
Right. I agree with you.
Democrat or Republican.
It is an absolute mess. We have not solved anything yet. We have a Senate. I was keeping track of it, but we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,090 days that the U.S. Senate has not passed a budget.
Yeah.
Everything's done with a continuing resolution. Folks, that's like if you have your checking account at your house and you don't actually know how much money's in there, then you just decide to allocate some more money to your checking account, and you just pull out the debit card whether you can ever pay for it or not. That's what they're doing.
They're waiting out the Bush tax cuts expiring. That's a part of it. They're just, let them expire, and then the money's going to come in, and then nobody voted for it or against it.
I think there's a lot of empirical evidence that when you lower taxes, even John F. Kennedy lowered taxes.
He had fewer revenues coming in.
No, it within 2 years the total revenue went up.
We don't have time for this discussion.
Well, you just don't want to listen to the truth.
We don't have time.
Every time you've lowered the taxes, you've had increase in the treasury.
We've had a recession, and then I would call this a depression now, and then you don't have enough money to pay the bills.
Okay, well, we've argued this,
including the ridiculous defense bills for the ridiculous wars that we had no reason or business to be involved in.
I would.
Who cuts taxes when you're going to 2 wars?
Here's what I had to say.
Stupid.
This is my 2 cents worth about the wars. When somebody does something to us, by all means, I think we need to go do something about it.
100%.
But for example, when we went to Kuwait the first time,
yes,
we went over there to protect the assets of the Kuwaitans.
Of course.
They should have paid us $2 a barrel until the bill was paid off.
1,000% agree with you.
And
we should have gotten the money before we set a foot in there.
If we're going to be a police force,
absolutely,
then we need to get paid by the hour to do it.
I don't argue with that.
All right, folks, we're going to move on to UWF. So go ahead, Deborah.
I think that they've lost their minds. They've got a piece of beach land that they do not have the lease on. It's not theirs. The lease belongs to the Board of Regents, actually, which it's up in the air as to whether that entity even still exists.
Right.
But they were sort of allocated it.
It was leased to them potentially like in the '60s, right? When they were trying to
the Board of Regents.
Right. When they were trying to get people to develop the beach.
Well, no, it was later than that, but it was leased to them specifically for the purpose of education. Right. For scientific research and stuff like that, and to keep it preserved.
And they haven't done anything in 30 years with it.
Well, they have. Well, I mean, they haven't done anything. I mean, they've got all kinds of wildlife. I mean, there's a whole ecology to that piece, and it's right next to the seashore.
Right.
So now all of a sudden, I guess Dr. Judy Benz, who's the president over there, has decided another public-private. I guess it's time for another public-private partnership. They want to develop this piece of property. Instead of going out there, I mean, my God, they've got a laboratory sitting there. Instead of going out there and perhaps trying to become an undergraduate center for that kind of thing, let's put, God only knows what they want to put on it.
Right.
And have consulted with nobody. Apparently there's a group of students that came out with a plan that had nothing, that said don't ever develop it. There's faculty and other people that have given them a plan that said don't ever develop it.
Right.
And obviously they want to go over these people's heads, and somebody's obviously handed a suitcase full of money to somebody else. I don't know who's getting the money, I don't know who's getting what, but there's no reason for this piece to be developed, and people had better raise an outcry if they want to nip it in the bud now.
It's just of course, folks, you've heard me express it quite often. The foolish man builds his house upon the sand. With the exception of some recreational facilities and a hotel room and very sparse condos, and I'm really not in favor of any condo development
anymore. Right?
Anything that's there, we should be prepared for it to be washed away, and I don't think we ought to put more and more and more dollars into something because it's us that pays for it.
But how does a university that's sitting there with a natural laboratory not decide, let's really focus on developing this major and bring people from all over the world in here to study this?
Here's my humble opinion. We have recently seen, for example, one of their vice presidents stand up and say, I've got a great idea. We can bring millions of dollars worth of tourism in here. Well, I have to ask. UWF is considered working their way towards being a major university. Are we giving out degrees in serving bourbon and Coke to drunk tourists now? I don't know.
It's just outrageous.
I don't know where the place is, folks, at a university to be having a discussion of we should be working towards having more tourists come to our community. Here's what I think the discussion ought to be at a university that wants to do better. I think it ought to be, how many chemists did we turn out this year? Right. How many engineers did we turn out?
Biologists.
How many marine biologists? Right. How many people in finance? How many doctors? How many master's degrees? How many usable degrees did we put out? But the main thing that our university needs to be talking about is, what are we going to do to ensure that those folks have a job? And I'm not talking about bringing more tourists in so someone with a 4-year degree can serve a bourbon and Coke to a drunk tourist. I'm saying is, if we're going to have discussions about economic development, which this is what this discussion is kind of focused around, where is the opportunity for the men and women that complete their degree? What is the university doing to help create a climate here so that these folks can get a job when they complete their degree? And look.
See, I don't think it has anything. They're saying it's economic development. I don't believe it. I think it has to do with the same old thing in Pensacola, which is my friend at Developer X and Developer Y want a job, a $1 billion job, half a billion dollar job. My buddy Construction Manager X wants a job. It's the same thing it always is. They jumped on the bandwagon for that ridiculous maritime park too. Right. The so-called, the baseball stadium. Right. Because X, Y, and Z wanted money and wanted a job.
At least they were smart enough to get out of there before.
Yeah. Well, they got in just long enough to sucker people into voting for it, and then decide, well, we don't want this, the museum and all this other stuff.
Here's the thing that one number that I throw out, and somebody actually posted this letter into the Pensacola News Journal. It was a letter from Judy Benz expressing that due to changes at the legislature, they were going to have a $6.5 million deficit in their budget. And then 6 days later, another letter comes out that we're wanting to buy the golf course and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And what they had on the table was spending more than $6 million. Look, folks, let me say it. I barely graduated high school. I'm really not that smart. But when I see somebody saying we have a $6.5 million deficit, it seems like to me the next words out of my mouth was, we need to find a way to economize, to do things a little bit different, to plug this one-time $6.5 million. In essence, they now have a $12 million hole in their budget if they do what they're thinking about.
See, here's part of it. They've managed to infuriate people across the board with this. Part of it is they want to have a justification for jacking tuition up to ridiculous levels.
Right.
That's a big part of it.
And folks, let me back the bus up on that, because I knew Deborah would get to that. Okay. Last year, the legislature, which has a great say over whether you have anybody going to college or not, folks, your tax dollars goes to every university in the state of Florida. The legislature said you could go up to 7%. We're kind of okay with a 7% increase, but the max would be 15%. The legislation didn't say you have to do 7. It said 0 to 7, but the absolute max is 15. Virtually every university in the state of Florida had a 15% tuition increase. Okay?
And let's remember, UWF is primarily an undergraduate institution.
Right.
They're not having to pay for graduate programs and expensive labs and all this other stuff that you need for graduate programs. This is an undergraduate institution.
Right. Well, a 15% tuition increase, folks, that's that's another about $350 a semester. And then with the discussion of football. Now, I'm not going to argue the merits of football. I will tell you this, that I have seen many a university, and so have you, that become completely obsessed with a football team and not paying attention to what they're doing, and we have things like Jerry Sandusky and all kind of ugly things that occur, and football is king, and we completely forget about education. One of the gems, one of the reasons that University of West Florida is a gem in the educational community is because they have for many years done a very good job, and it's getting better in a recognized, respected degree coming from that university. The football discussion was going to entail $150 a semester per student to fund it.
It's ridiculous.
And just piling on. Look, folks, I was completely shocked. One of the board members of UWF, and during the discussion of increasing the tuition and the potential football, he stated that he knew that was going to put a college degree out of the reach of some people, but it had to be done.
It's outrageous. He needed to have been fired immediately.
Well, you know, folks, we're not competing with the state of Florida now. We're competing with Beijing, China, and India, which India turns out several 100,000 top degree people every year, and they come over here on special visas to work because we're not turning them out over here. You know, the battlefield is much larger now.
Yeah, and I don't even think you can get an engineering degree at UWF. I don't think they have that program.
And we have to focus. We have to focus. You know, look, I'm tickled to death that the Santa Rosa County K through 12 ranks second in the state of Florida. That's good. That's an accomplishment. That's marvelous. You know, one of the things that I've always said is when you're number one in the United States of America, I'm ready to throw a party. And when you're number one on planet Earth, we'll throw you another party. But we're not competing. Our students aren't competing in the state of Florida. They're competing on a much larger playing field. And look, I'm just very concerned. You know, we want to buy a golf course. We want to develop this piece of property. We want to increase tourism. We want to have a partnership. We're going to build a hotel on property that belongs to you and I, folks. Okay? Now the school.
Let's talk. The terms of the lease say they can't do that, but they're going to push it.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Look, I'm not opposed to a hotel close to the University of West Florida so that parents will have a place to stay when they come visit their kids. Although we have plenty of hotels on Davis Highway right now. What concerns me is, and we've been told that the university, there will be a convention center that they will get to use. Well, somebody in the private sector is going to make a lot of money off of renting hotel rooms. And it's sitting on property that belongs to the taxpayers, and I didn't get a vote in it.
Right.
I'm very aware. You've heard Deborah and I talk about, just like with Eglin Air Force Base, building a property on some beachfront over there. You know.
Yeah, the Emerald.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same situation. Just as we have issues with economic development in Santa Rosa County, and Okaloosa County's had problems, and Escambia County has problems. They got the same thing going on at the college level here. There's a lot of money in education now. There really is. The state of Florida gives them a lot of money. Their students pay them a lot of money, and I'm concerned that we need more oversight on what is going on in the transactions that occur there.
Yeah.
So, you know,
well, once you have that situation where you've got that free government money coming in, then you always got people building empires and wanting to hand it out to their friends, hand this contract out to this guy, and eventually there's just too many fingers in the pie.
Exactly.
And it comes out of our pockets, of course.
One final issue before we close the show. It was reported in local media, and of course there's a police report. And I'm not going to get into what caused the police report, but the manager who runs the Navarre Pier, Dorothy Sly, this is a matter of public record, folks. You can look it up, the clerk of courts. It's right there. She was arrested in several charges one felony charge against it. And the reason I bring this up, and I know some people are going to say, well, you know, that's somebody's personal life, and well, no folks, it's a little bit more than that. Here's a person that's representing Santa Rosa County that is managing something that belongs to all of us, and it's a very ugly situation. And I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and I told him, I said, well, you know, I have a very long memory, and Miss Sly, and I'll take you back to when the pier was closed for the wedding of her daughter, and it was closed. I have the sign to prove it. The pier was closed. The end of the pier was closed without permission or anything like that. And I caught a lot of heat because I stood my ground down there. But Miss Sly got on Channel 3 News, and her quote was that apparently people that are concerned about this are uneducated and had very poor training by their parents. And I'd just like to turn that around now and say, well, maybe if somebody was well educated and trained well by their parents, there wouldn't be police involvement, multiple counts, and felony charges against one. I mean, fair is fair.
Well, I do want to interject, because I would say, first of all, the charges in question are not related to what she does on the pier. They're no way related to that. And secondly, and you know I spent a lot of time in Navarre, and I had not spoken to Ms. Sly, but I will tell you from what I understand of what happened, that, you know, it turned into something that it shouldn't have been, and I just say, you know, you need to know the whole story before you talk about people.
Educated people who were trained properly by their parents
I understand that
would call the sheriff's department ahead of time and say, I have a problem over here and I need some assistance.
Well, but sometimes stuff escalates out of control, and the person who ends up arrested is not necessarily the person who's at fault.
Time will tell. I don't believe that it's a very good reflection on Santa Rosa County. I'm Jerry Cooey.
I'm Deborah Nelson. Thanks for joining us. Good night.